Hello and welcome to Newsline. I'm David Delmenico.
And I'm Patrick Laverick. Coming up today, we'll look at how an organisation is helping refugees with rising energy costs and also how the shift to a cashless society is impacting small business. But first, Jack Price with local news. Jack, what's happening around Melbourne?
Plenty to report on today, as always. The Federal Health Minister, Greg Hunt, has unveiled the biggest shake-up of private health insurance in decades, with young people set to be the major beneficiaries. Under 30s will be offered premium discounts of up to 10%, as Mr Hunt stressed the importance of bringing younger, healthier people into the private health system. Changes include a widening of coverage to include more mental health conditions, a new product rating system for health policies, and the removal of coverage for natural therapies such as yoga and Pilates. A 20-year-old man has been charged over a hit-and-run crash that killed nurse Linda Hansen in Oakley on Monday. Police allege Sebastian Kennett was behind the wheel of a stolen vehicle when it slammed into Miss Hansen's car. Mr Kennett is alleged to have then run away from the crash scene. After a 4-day manhunt, police arrested him at a house in Blackburn South last night, and he's expected to face the Magistrates Court on Monday. And Victorian taxi drivers may soon be able to set their own fares, in a move being considered by the state government. The changes to the law would allow taxi drivers to better compete with Uber. That's it for local news today. Back to you, Patrick.
Thanks, Jack. Last night, Zalika Rismal reported on the complexity of the energy market for non-English speaking Victorians. Tonight, we take a look at an organisation which assists and educates newly arrived refugees on how to be energy wise. Tim Purdy reports.
While the federal and state governments are at war over energy policies, Victorians are paying more than ever in utility costs and struggling to navigate an increasingly complex energy market.
Affordability is a big issue for an increasing number of Victorians, and for those that have newly arrived that perhaps may be on restricted work visas. You still have to have energy, and having access to energy and affordable energy is a big issue.
When we came here, we found that the bills is very expensive, and that was explained to us by the case manager and the settlement, which is AIMS Australia.
Joseph Yohana is a former refugee from war-torn Iraq, who now works for AIMS helping to resettle newly arrived refugees. AIMS use a third-party agency to ensure their clients get the best and most flexible energy deals.
And the property is connected with no contract. So we explain to client, if your neighbor, friends, community says to you that this is not a good company, you can change to another one.
Australia's treatment of refugees arriving by boat has been heavily criticised. However, Australia's settlement programs are considered amongst the world's best, according to the UNHCR. Organisations like AIMS visit the homes of their clients to provide useful energy tips.
About how the clients can save money, why do they need to use less electricity, to be smarter in using the gas or water, and through that we make successful tenants.
Tim Purdy, Newsline.
The City of Melbourne has come up with a plan that it hopes will make our city one of the great skateboarding hubs of the world. Stephanie Vigilante has the details.
In light of skating becoming an Olympic sport in 2020, the proposal aims to ensure the needs of the wider community are met and that everyone feels safe in these public places.
I think now you're seeing parks, like we were in Chelsea today, and that was just, it's a whole new level. So that people come to the streets like in spots like this, which is great, but yeah, it would be great to have a park that's a little bit more accessible and a little bit more exciting.
This skate park in Kensington is one of the proposed parks for redevelopment. It is over 15 years old and has plans to be redeveloped in the next 5 years. The City of Melbourne plans to draw inspiration from cities like Vancouver, Paris and Copenhagen for skating infrastructure. However, not everyone is excited about the changes.
In fact, there's not much I would change about it. The kids really like it. I mean, it's good for all ages. So as long as there's still open space and there's still room for the kids to, there's still a skate park here and still a bike track, something that the kids can play on, then I'm comfortable with that.
Skateboarding as a hobby continues to grow in Melbourne, with more than 1/3 children participating each year.
Yeah, it's really sick because skateboarding is this creative outlet for people, like growing up, I never thought that skateboarding would take me where it did. It was just like, you're a ratbag kid that's annoying everybody and like, go away. And now it's an Olympic sport and they're recognising us as athletes.
Stephanie Vigilante, Newsline.
With the City of Melbourne considering renovating some of their skate parks, one councillor says she would like to see more women involved in the sport. Rosie McQuire reports.
Here in Melbourne, skateboarding is growing more and more popular. Considered as another form of street entertainment like busking or graffiti, it's still something that seems to be more of a men's sport. Nastasia Jones works with Girls Skate Australia, pushing for the involvement of women in the sport, while working with the City of Melbourne to improve the skate parks.
I think it's really important for women to have role models in sports in general, and that's happening. You're seeing that in the footy, which is getting more young women engaged in footy itself. So that's happening with skateboarding now. So if you see girls slaying at your local park, you're more inclined to go down as like a 5 or 6 year old, and that's how we get, you know, skaters that are the same level, if not better, than dudes.
In order to showcase some of Australia's best female skateboarders in a predominantly male sport, the Daughters of Doom skateboarding competition will take place here at Riverside Skate Park next month.
We're looking to grow the comp now, so we're putting in more money, putting in more resources, and we've got some really good corporate sponsors on side, as well as the Riverside Skate Park and City of Melbourne involved with that.
Olympic hopeful 21-year-old Shanae Collins is part of Girls Skate Australia and competes in competitions all over the world.
So I just recently got invited to skate X Games, which is like pretty sick, like it's a pretty big deal. There's only like 20 women around the world that get invited to skate that.
Daughters of Doom will take place on the 25th of November at Riverside Skate Park in Alexandra Gardens. Rosie McQuire, Newsline.
As more and more of us use our credit and debit cards for everyday transactions, small businesses are needing to adapt. Ellen McCutcheon investigates a changing market.
Set debit card charges, percentage fees on credit card transactions, and monthly rental costs for EFTPOS terminals mean that running a card-friendly small business can be quite expensive. As customers enjoy the benefits of the increased acceptance of card payments, businesses are worried about what a cashless society may cost them.
I think they're very high. The monthly fees payable on credit card, debit cards are incredibly taxing on a small business. But I understand, at least if it's tap and go, we don't have to go to the bank and those sorts of charges. But I do think the percentage is very, very high.
While businesses may be tempted to pass these costs on to their customers, a recent crackdown from the ACCC has meant all businesses are banned from charging excessive fees for card transactions.
The most important thing to remember is you cannot charge more than what your acceptable costs are. Now, acceptable costs are the costs of the terminal rental, the cost of the actual transaction going through, and maybe the cost of the line that you use if you're in a fixed premises when you've got to actually rent a telephone line.
While businesses may be concerned about the costs of going cashless, there are plenty of positives to keep in mind.
There is a huge benefit in having no cash, particularly in some areas. So number one, security. You don't have the cash to the till. If someone holds a knife or a gun at you, you don't have the cash to give them. Number two, if you're in the food business, you're not actually handling cash.
While they're not totally embracing the change, it seems businesses have no option but to accept the disappearance of cash from shoppers' wallets. Ellen McCutcheon, Newsline.
You know, I can't remember the last time I used cash. What about you, David?
Oh, I'm a cashless man, Patrick. Yeah, I can't even remember the last time I withdrew cash from an ATM. And I think all of us are kind of heading that way.
Yeah, it seems to be. And now to movies. Independent cinemas across Melbourne are prospering right now, but with big chains like Palace Cinemas going national, being independent doesn't have to mean being small. Amy Sullivan looks at why these independent cinemas are on the rise.
A night at the movies used to be a big deal, a rare thing that was seen as a formal occasion until the multiplex revolutionised the way movies are consumed. This, paired with the arrival of blockbuster cinema in the 80s, meant that having multiple screens made more money and evolved into the cinema format we see today. In Australia, the main multiplex giants are Hoyts and Village, but there are many smaller cinema chains giving them a run for their money, such as Palace Cinemas. Palace are a Melbourne-made group running popular cinemas such as Carlton's Cinema Nova and the Astor Theatre on Chapel Street. They are known as an independent chain, but are expanding rapidly, with plans to open new complexes in Moonee Ponds and Coburg's Pentridge retail development announced. So what does their expansion mean for the traditional multiplex? Are independent cinemas with a more unique focus on film the way forward, or will Palace become the new Hoyts? These smaller cinema houses do a lot for keeping the magic of cinema alive in the community. General Manager of the Astor Theatre, Zach Hepburn, says that they provide a more unique, nostalgic experience than the multiplex.
I think there's a real thirst for communal cinema-going experiences, and the only way that you can really entertain that is by broadening your reach, whether that be by smaller auditoriums that can play more content, or more versatile auditoriums like the Astor that have a non-traditional screening program, so double features or movie marathons.
So ultimately, more independent complexes mean more choice for the cinema goer and fosters a more memorable experience with family and friends, rather than the cookie-cutter experience you'll find at the multiplex. Keeping the magic of cinema alive and the community presence is a product of this expansion, and that is a positive for film buffs and cinema goers alike. Amy Sullivan, Newsline.
We'll be back after the break with a look at what's been happening around the globe.
Welcome back to Newsline. Coming up, we'll be taking a look at how online sports betting. But now here's Alan McCutcheon with World News. Alan, what's happening around the world?
Thanks, Patrick. Israel and the United States have withdrawn from UNESCO, the United Nations Cultural and Education Agency, citing an anti-Israel bias. The US State Department says there is a need for fundamental reform in the organisation. The United States distanced itself from UNESCO 6 years ago when it began withholding funds. British actress Sophie Dix is the latest woman to accuse prominent Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein of sexual harassment. Dix alleges that in 1990, when she was 22, Weinstein threw her onto a bed and tugged at her clothing. She says the incident was the most damaging thing that had happened in her life. And an American-Canadian family held hostage by the Taliban in Afghanistan has been released after 5 years. American woman Caitlin Coleman and her Canadian husband Joshua Boyle had 3 children while they were held captive. Pakistan secured the family's release, earning praise from US President Donald Trump, who called it a positive moment for the US-Pakistan relations. That's it for World News for the Minute. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Ellen. Now, some people find science and technology hard to understand, and I'm one of them. Thea Matazza reports on a new Melbourne exhibition engaging audiences with scientific concepts through a series of artistic installations.
Art, science and technology will come together at RMIT Gallery for Experimenta Make Sense, an exhibition featuring more than 20 international and local artists who are exploring what it means to be human in an information society, where technology is growing exponentially.
We were very conscious that with the pace of change these days, actually we're struggling to keep pace with the present, let alone thinking about the future. So we were really interested to look at how artists are responding to that and how they're making sense of the contemporary world.
The artists who work under the name of Scale Free Network say their art installation is really about visualising and demonstrating an idea, and also turning that idea into a theatrical phenomenon.
Art is a way of reframing scientific ideas, and often people are afraid of science or afraid that they don't, understand science, and so art is sort of a way of disarming, the viewer and getting them to perhaps think differently or approach a scientific idea differently.
Bryony has been collaborating with a physicist for the past 4 years on another piece of artwork in this exhibition. It involves visitors to the gallery using tape to draw lines that interact with one another over the duration of the exhibition. Over time, patterns will start to emerge. The gallery director says this is the right time to exhibit artwork that explores the impact of artificial intelligence on aspects of our lives. She says this is shaping up to be the critical issue of our time. The exhibition is open to the general public and runs until the 11th of November. Thea Matazza, Newsline.
National Bird Week is on later this month, with people being encouraged to count their backyard birds. Some birdwatchers may get a surprise when they realise there are more than just common species around the suburbs of Melbourne. Ewan Kelly has the details.
Australia has 155 species of birds listed as threatened, with 22 already extinct. With Melbourne home to over 300 species, many of the threatened birds live right on our doorstep.
A lot of threatened species occur in urban environments. So, for example, there's a few critically endangered birds which actually occur within the Greater Melbourne region.
Sean Dooley is the Communications Manager of BirdLife, an initiative that helps to survey birds around Melbourne.
You've got these little tiny fragments of habitat dotted all around the suburbs. The trouble is they're so isolated from each other that right across Melbourne, just, pinprick by pinprick, the lights go out for these species.
Native bird species have been at risk ever since European settlement, and urban sprawl has absolutely decimated native bird populations in Melbourne. The sprawl results in destruction of nesting areas, introduction of feral and stray cats, and disruption to breeding patterns. Aggressive birds also tend to thrive in these suburban areas, creating even more pressures for threatened species.
You get native birds like magpies or the noisy miner, which is a type of honeyeater. That has absolutely boomed around Melbourne. Like they are so common now, and it's actually quite a threat to a lot of native birds because they're really common, but they're aggressive, and so they drive the smaller birds like the wrens and the thornbills away.
Australia has one of the highest rates of extinction for a developed country in the world.
Unfortunately, Australia is actually quite a bit behind with our threatened species management. I do hate to say, but some of the critically endangered species could go extinct within our lifetime. It really is now or never.
Ewan Kelly, Newsline.
Thanks to Ewan for that report. Now, tell me, Patrick, are you a backyard birdwatcher?
Well, David, we've recently adopted a rescue dog and he chases away all the birds, unfortunately.
No birds?
No, unfortunately. What about you?
Oh, yeah, I have heaps of birds, heaps of birds. It's disappointing to hear, Patrick. Online gambling companies have made sports betting all too easy. And for the few punters who do beat the bookie, account bans are making it harder than ever to claim a win. Jack Price has this report.
The gambling industry has undergone huge changes in the last decade. And with the advent of online betting, the odds are increasingly stacked in the favour of sports betting companies. Michael Lynch has worked in the industry for several years.
The gambling companies are a business, so they want to make money, and as soon as they're not making money, I guess they'll try to find ways to stop it.
He's referring to the fact that companies will often ban online punters who start regularly winning, even if not in large amounts.
So it's in the terms and conditions that they can basically refuse a bet, and they don't have to have any reason.
Algorithms are now detecting successful punters and preventing them from placing further bets. Oliver Williams became one of these banned punters after notching up some moderate wins, his long hours of research going to waste.
I think they're using excessive knowledge and excessive information about your activities to bar you from making a profit that you should rightfully be allowed to make.
It's springtime in Melbourne, and for many, that means it's racing season. With sports betting companies becoming increasingly pervasive and often finding their way onto our screens, it's time to think twice before you say giddy up to a flurry at the races. More than ever, it seems betting companies just can't lose. Once you start winning, you might get banned.
I think it's a restriction of free trade. You know, it's criminal, I think.
Jack Price, Newsline.
Don't go anywhere. Coming up, we'll find out what the impact on the same-sex marriage debate is having on a gay couple. Welcome back. Now, with the same-sex marriage survey closing soon, we're going to look at what impact the same-sex marriage debate is having on the gay community. Tim Purdy is in the studio with two special guests.
Yes, there is only 2 weeks left to get your same-sex marriage postal votes in the mail. Debate has at times been toxic. Andrew Blogg and Dom Centafanti have been in a relationship for 7 years. They join us in the studio now. Andrew and Dom, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks.
How has the same-sex marriage postal survey affected you since the debate began?
for myself, I find it deeply sort of personal and offensive. The idea that a society votes on whether a group in that society can have the same rights or not is just ridiculous to myself. And, you know, we pay the same taxes. All we want is the same rights, really.
Look, from my perspective, I think it's time for the heterosexual community to actually step up. It's actually their human rights that are being violated as well. So it's up to them to protect, you know, their brothers and sisters that are also LGBTI.
Would you like to see them stepping up more when, for example, when we see things like "No" was written in the sky this week in the skies of Melbourne?
Yes, look, that was really terrible. I didn't see it, but my first thoughts were about how children would be affected in the schoolyard, because the one in Sydney was actually on the weekend. So, yeah.
And how do you respond to others, people like Tony Abbott, who say that marriage has always been between a man and a woman?
This is the man that claims there's no that there's climate change, but it's beneficial because people can die from a heat wave rather than freezing to death. Well, it's just all misinformation, really. I mean, marriage has existed in its current form for about 1,000 years. We've been around as a species for hundreds of thousands of years, so they're just inventing what suits them at the time. And they also focus on things like child protection, which has nothing to do with two people just simply getting married.
And earlier, Andrew, we were having a chat before we came on air, and you were telling me that the trans community has suffered the most. Why is that?
I believe it's because of the no rhetoric. They're attacking the Safe Schools program in particular, which is there to safeguard transgender people and all gay people, sort of thing. But if it's something to do with racism, there is a protection of the family, but often trans people don't have those protections because they're rejected from their family. That's why the Safe Schools is very, very important.
And Italy now recognise gay marriage, and they've recently allowed or approved for same-sex civil unions. I understand you guys were in Italy recently. Can you tell me what it was like to attend one of those ceremonies?
Oh, look, it was absolutely wonderful. We just saw two friends that loved each other, able to get married, and the sky didn't fall in. You know, it was just a wonderful day.
And for you, Don?
For me, I can speak Italian, so I was fortunate and I could hear the whole ceremony. It was wonderful to hear the mayor speak personally about the couple that he knew, and that he was, you know, happy to marry them. And then he also read out the legislation wearing the sash of the Italian flag, so it was quite emotional. And the legislation basically states that it has to mirror the act of marriage in every sense.
That's great. Thanks so much for joining us, guys. That's all we've got time for. Back to you at the desk, Patrick.
Thanks, Tim. That was a great interview. Now to sport with Didier Stobart.
Thanks, Pat. Well, the wait is over. The first deals of the AFL trade period have been accepted, with Jake Lever getting to his desired destination in Melbourne. The D's had to give up their number 10 pick in this year's draft and a first-round pick in next year's draft. Devon Smith gets to the Bombers for pick number 11, but the team now finds itself in a difficult situation with limited trade currency if they want both Sard and the controversial Jake Stringer. The Australian women's cricketers have benefited from the recent player strike, with the Sydney Sixers signing Elise Perry, Alyssa Healy and Ash Garner on long-term deals. All three players have been selected in the Australian squad for the biggest game of the summer, the Ashes Test against England in December. And finally, UFC fighter Conor McGregor is reportedly weighing up a fight in the WWE at the next WrestleMania. McGregor has tried so many different codes now, it wouldn't surprise me if his next fight was against this huge kangaroo who was spotted in a creek near Margaret River. I think the kangaroo would have him covered. What do you think, guys?
I think if he can't beat Mayweather, he's not going to beat one of ours. Thanks, Didier. Now to the weather with Amy Sullivan.
Thanks, guys. Well, I hate to be like Barbara Streisand and rain on your parade, but unfortunately today we did see a few light showers after a cloudy morning. But that is set to clear later tonight with a top of 18. Our 4-day forecast is looking up, however, with the sun coming out over the weekend. Saturday we'll see a top of 20 and partly cloudy with a slight chance of a drizzle. We'll see that improving on Sunday with a top of 21 and mostly sunny. Monday will be mostly sunny with a light fog in the morning, set to clear with some northeasterly winds and a top of 27. But plan a picnic for Tuesday when we'll see sun, sun and more sun with a top of 28. But I wouldn't get too excited with possible showers developing after our sunny streak this weekend. But you know what they say about Melbourne, 4 seasons in one day, so bring your brolly anyway, Patrick and David.
We will be sure to remember that, Amy. And that was today's show.
Hope you have a great weekend, Melbourne. Take it easy.